Good day, everyone, and welcome to our very first spiritual festival of Aries in 2026. So before we start, friends, let's link up with each other as a group. Let's raise our consciousness high as we possibly can. Then endeavor to hold steady, holding the mind unwaveringly in the group light. And realize that on DK's side, he's also standing steady, pouring out upon us his love and strength, and endeavoring to lift us up into a higher state of consciousness. And now visualize ahead of us a disc or a sphere of indigo blue, a deep electric blue. And we imagine DK standing in the center of that disc, waiting. Then see a band of golden light between us and the disc, gradually shortening, then bringing us closer together, slowly and steadily, until we enter into the heart of the blue disc. And let us sound a blue Om. And let the words of the Master, friends, just make an impression upon the cells of our brain, energizing them and linking us to Master DK's consciousness so as to widen and deepen our understanding and comprehension. So today we will be exploring the spirit of resurrection, the forces of resurrection, and Aries and its relation to the will, and Shambhala. So we are told by DK to have clearly in our minds these three groups of spiritual energies, which at the time of the three full moons of April, May, and June will be released into activity and which will aid humanity in its major task of rebuilding the new and better world. So what are these three forces? First, there's the forces of restoration, directed by the spirit of resurrection. They restore morale and psychological health. That is, restore men's condition to a happier and more wholesome attitude to life. Then there's the forces of enlightenment directed by the Buddha. They inaugurate an era of right thinking in the establishment of right human relations. They intensify spiritual values and strengthen the will to good in all lovers of humanity. And finally, at the June full moon, the forces of reconstruction, synthesized by the Christ. They bring about the rebuilding of the tangible world upon the new lines, and they will precipitate what the other two groups have made possible subjectively. This unique opportunity which confronts the Christ in his great hour draws near is that of unifying and synthesizing and integrating all these forces into one great downpouring of spiritual energy. And these involve the activities of the spirit of resurrection, the inspiration of the Buddha as he conveys the strength of our Logos, Sanat Kumara. Then the forces of reconstruction at the June full moon. So DK emphasizes that we try to grasp the unity of this hierarchical effort during these 3 periods of full moon. So then let's start with the spirit of resurrection. Who is he? Well, we are told that he is an extra planetary being, a living spiritual entity, a life-giving spirit, a member of the council chamber at Shambhala. He is the chosen emissary for the council chamber of Shambhala. He is working temporarily under the direction of the Christ. He is the Son of righteousness, and he arises with healing in his wings. So Christ will direct the spirit of resurrection to restore livingness to men's spiritual aims and life to their planning, to engender anew the vitality needed to implement the trends of the new age, and to guide humanity out of the dark cave of death, isolation, and selfishness into the light of the new day. To carry this life-giving energy which counteracts death, this vision which gives incentive to life, and this hope which can restore all nations. And the forces of restoration under the spirit of resurrection's direction at the June full moon, they restore the will to live and the will to good. They restore psychological health and morale. They reorient the human psyche in acquiring the vision which will bring about right human relations. And these forces of restoration are concerned with human vision, human integrity, and human relations as they underlie the entire problem of the brotherhood of men. They will render futile the efforts of the old order in politics, religion, and education. They will endeavor to offset 2 tendencies. One, the tendency to crystallize, to cherish that which has gone. And secondly, the tendency to over-fatigue and the complete collapse due to the weight of the war, and at the time was 19 during the Second World War, and to the physical and psychological strain under which mankind has labored for so many years. And this statement can be equally applied to modern times, as humanity's astral and physical bodies are tired. They've been under constant strain due to the numerous conflicts assailing them over the past century or so, and in the present are still happening and causing havoc in these bodies. The spirit of resurrection is the opponent and the antagonist of the spirit of death. Physical death takes place only when the psychological and mental vitality of the individual or of a nation or of humanity drops below a certain level. Humanity has been responding to the processes of dying during the last 150 years. Psychologically, mankind has been ruled by selfishness, and selfishness is the potent seed of death, material death, psychological death, and mental death. So what's the objective then of the forces of restoration? It's the restoration of men's mental condition to a wholesome and happier approach to life, which is the primary objective. These forces will bring about the emergence of the new civilization, which is definitely men's creative work. The forces of restoration are, on a small scale, evoking response from the members of the new group of world servers and from disciples everywhere. And as their psychological morale stiffens and their will to live and their will to good is strengthened, an immediate effect will be felt on a larger scale. And the work of the spirit of resurrection will intensify and is already making its presence felt. So what are the effects then of the spirit of resurrection and the forces of restoration? More and more people, we are told, are beginning to be forward-looking and to hope with greater conviction and courage to a better world setup. Their wishful thinking and their emotional desires are slowly giving place to a more practical attitude. Their clear thinking and their fixed determination are far more active and their plans better laid, because both their thinking and their planning are today based on facts. They are also beginning to recognize those factors and conditions which must not be restored. And this, decade tells us, is a point of major importance. And we are seeing that today more than ever. So the spirit of resurrection directs the forces of restoration to hierarchy, evoking response from the new group of world servers and disciples to stiffen their psychological morale to strengthen their will to live and will to good, and releasing the potency of the spirit of resurrection in the hearts of men everywhere. So in short, the energy which will lead to the restoration of human aspiration, right idealism, and fixed humanitarian intention is that distributed by the forces of restoration, which were set in motion this year when that was written way back in the 30s, at the time of the Easter full moon, under the direction of the masters of the wisdom and the supervision of the Christ. And at the Aries full moon, let the demand go out to the appearance of this life-giving spirit. Let it go forth with such intensity that the hierarchy will be called into active response and will immediately release the potency of this spirit into the hearts of men everywhere. So friends, if we look at today's conjunctions of all these planets in the heavens, could we ask ourselves, will the stellium of planets in Aries during the next month, April, intensify the work of the forces of restoration and the spirit of resurrection, strengthening the will to good in human hearts everywhere, restoring morale, mental vitality, human relations, vision and hope of a better world and better conditions of life? Will they bring about greater unity in consciousness, cooperation between individuals and nations? And will they further planetary synthesis? It remains to be seen, but nonetheless, these planets all conjuncting in Aries are surely a boost of energy from the spirit of resurrection and the forces of restoration in humanity. So now let's explore the energies of Aries and the ray of will. Well, we know that Aries is the zodiacal sign through which the first ray of will and power reaches our planetary life. Ray 1. And it's the will of the Father aspect manifesting through Aries that governs Shambhala. And that's a very important statement from DK. So that ray will, the ray of will manifesting through Aries, which governs Shambhala. Aries is one of the constellations of the cardinal cross of the heavens. And this is the cross of God, the Father, and therefore of the incarnating monad. It's the expression of will or power as it expresses itself through the great creative process. As Aries is the sign of creativity. Aries initiates the cycle of manifestation. The first impulse is awakened in Aries, for Aries is the place where the initial idea to institute, to instigate activity takes form. So it's the birthplace of ideas. And a true idea is in reality a spiritual impulse taking form, whether subjective and objective. And Aries is the origin of the will to incarnate. The first ray aspect of the monad, responding to the first aspect of deity, evokes response from the first ray aspect of the soul, and the first step towards incarnation is taken on that plane in the system, which is the mental plane. So if we think for a minute of what instigated our incarnation down here, it's our monad that instigated that will to incarnate. So we are here because it is the will of the monad. And this impulse relates also to the solar logos, to the planetary logos, and of course, to us, the souls. So that very first impulse to manifest on earth, or to manifest in the solar system, or to create the solar system, originated in Aries. Aries is the constellation through which initiating conditions will stream into our solar system, because it's the birthplace of ideas, of that will to create and the will to manifest. And Aries embodies that will to create, that which will express the will to good. It's the monadic ray of our planetary logos, ray 1. And his soul ray is ray 2. And his personality ray, ray 3. So we can note here, therefore, how the transmitting ray of our planetary logos is the first, and hence the place which the will plays in our human evolutionary process. His transforming ray is the second, and that eventually brings, therefore, transfiguration through the medium of his personality, the third ray. And in this combination, we have the reason why, in the evolution of the will aspect, you have the influence of Mars and Mercury, being the personality and sole ruler of Aries. Mars bringing conflict and the death of the form, and Mercury bringing illumination and the development of the intuition as a result of that conflict and death. So new cycles of being and of consciousness are initiated by conflict. Such seems as yet to be the law of life and the governing factor in evolution. So we shouldn't shy away from conflict, but face it straight on. Because eventually harmony eventuates. So if, however, the result of this initiating, energizing will is to produce such beneficent effects of intuitive understanding and the activity of Mercury as the messenger of the gods, it can be seen how truly through conflict the will to good can be wrought out. Now let's explore then what is the will, which is not an easy subject. We are told that of the will, its uses and its functions, as yet we know little. Knowledge as to the nature of the will in any true sense only comes after the third initiation. So DK tells us that he wants to elucidate for us the nature of the will in some clear measure, though complete understanding is not possible, because it's love that reveals the will. So that shouldn't be discouragement when we read the next statement. Even from the angle of hierarchy, the divine will, as it is essentially, remains the great mystery. But in spite of that, they can and do know and serve the purpose. So even to hierarchy, the will is a bit of a mystery. So we've still got hope. There's still hope for us. The purpose is that aspect of the divine will which seeks immediate expression on earth. Now, even Christ himself was unable to express it with facility and understanding when he contacted the will of the Father in the episode of Gethsemane. 2,000 years have gone since Gethsemane and since Christ made his initial contact with the Shambhala force. And by this means and on behalf of humanity, he established a relationship which even at the close of 20 centuries is but a thin, frail line of connecting energy. But we've got to make a beginning. So DK tells us that nevertheless, the evocation of the will is for disciples particularly the new and most necessary development. They must seek to understand the use of the will, its nature, purpose, and its relation to what you understand by the human will. And that's exactly what we are attempting to do today. We're going to attempt to understand or have at least a clearer understanding of the nature of the will, the purpose of Sanat Kumara, and the use of that will on earth. So let's dive straight into it. But before we do that, let's try to understand the distinction between purpose, will, and plan, because they're all different. So the meaning of the terms purpose, or will, or the plan, is that purpose is the motive behind, the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. It's the why behind an action, the overarching reason, the motivation, the long-term goal. So purpose is often referred to as the big picture. The will is the energy used to achieve our intention. That is how we stretch and we turn our attention to achieve that purpose. And we will see the distinction later on between will and desire, because that's also important for us to clarify. And the plan is the proposed design or arrangement to achieve the goal. And this is an attempt on my part to bring in an analogy, and that's my understanding of it. Let's say that my purpose is to visit an art exhibition. So I will use my will to make it happen. So if I have a strong will, I won't allow any distractions or excuses to come in the way of that purpose. So I'm not going to say, oh, it's raining today. Oh, it's too expensive, too far, or whatever other excuses might come in the way. And the plan is therefore the method that I'll use to achieve my purpose, that is, to visit the art exhibition. That is, I'm going to try to work out the necessary steps of how and when I'm going to get there, and other factors such as weather, opening or closing hours, how lunch, etc., etc. So my purpose is to visit an art exhibition. I will use my will, and my will can be either weak or a bit strong. So I will either get there or I won't get there. But the plan is the method that I use to achieve my purpose, these steps that I will take so that I can achieve that purpose. So now let's put that into our esoteric understanding. Sanat Kumara and his council at Shambhala are the only beings upon our planet who know just what the nature of the divine purpose is. And now we're talking about both planetary and solar, because Sanat Kumara is the sole custodian of the purpose of the solar logos on earth. So it's their function, Sanat Kumara and his council, and their obligation to work out that purpose into manifestation. And this they do by the use of the will. So the will ever implements the purpose. And we see that echoing in the great invocation, let purpose guide the little wills of men. And the plan, the vision of the solar logos and of the planetary logos is closely related to intention and purpose, and is the cause of the plan. So the members of hierarchy are seen to are the custodian of the divine plan and expressions of the love of God. And again, we see that from the great invocation, the purpose which the masters know and serve. As hierarchy is the custodian of the divine plan, and the divine plan implements then divine purpose in the world. So then what is spiritual will? DK gives us a list of what it's not. So let's have a look at that first. So spiritual will is not determination, which is expression of a fixed and united desire. It is not a forceful expression of intention. It is not self-will. It is not one-pointed attention. It is not whipping up and stimulating desire so that it can be transmuted into will. And it's not an implacable, unshakable, immovable focusing of all energies in the need to triumph or in the need to win. And at the time, he was talking about winning the war. So what is it? We are told that it is fundamentally an expression of the law of sacrifice. And under this law, the unit recognizes responsibility. And the unit applies to each one of us, the planetary logos, hierarchy, even the solar logos. So under this law, the unit identifies itself with the whole. That's what spiritual will is all about. It's identification with the whole. And the divine and the will is a divine aspect in men, which puts him en rapport with and then controlled by divine purpose, which intelligently understood in time and space, and then is implemented by the soul as an expression of loving application. So in other words, the soul applies the divine purpose intelligently, and it uses the will to make it happen. Because by then, the unit would be so identified with a purpose that it is then controlled by that purpose. He embodies the purpose. So the will is an expression of the law of sacrifice. Because the will, as considered and understood by the initiate, is essentially that monadic essence, qualified by fixed determination, which is identified with the will or the purpose of the planetary logos. And that's why one of the appellations of Sanat Kumara is that of the great sacrifice, because of his identification with the will, the higher will, the will of the Logos, the solar Logos, which is identified also with the cosmic, the purpose of the cosmic Logos. So all aligned. So then what is the law of sacrifice? The Aegis Wisdom teaches us that this law means the impulse of giving. The solar deity gave his life to the universe, to the solar system, to the planet, and the manifested worlds consequently appeared. And the cosmic deity, that is the one whom naught may be said, has likewise done the same. So they are both under the law of sacrifice, of giving. It was his impulse, his will, his desire, his incentive, his idea and purpose to appear, to manifest. Physically, the creative act then took place, and the process of manifestation began its cyclic evolutionary existence. And as we saw earlier on, and that occurs in the sign Aries. It's the energy of Aries which initiated this whole process and got the ball rolling. The cosmic Christ was crucified upon the cross of matter, and by that great sacrifice, opportunity was then offered to all evolving lives, in all kingdoms and in all, meaning other evolutions, because there are other evolutions such as the Devic evolutions, and I'm sure that there are others as well that we haven't been told, that are also involved. We do not know his ultimate purpose or plan, and only aspects of his technique and method begin to appear to the illuminated mind. The planetary logos now on our Earth scheme, one of the seven spirits before the throne, took physical incarnation, and under the form of Sanat Kumara, the Ancient of Days and the Lord of the world, is the great sacrifice. He left the glory of the high places, and for the sake of the evolving sons of men, took upon himself a physical form and was made in the likeness of men. He is the direct, self-created manifestation of pure spirit itself, that is of his monad. Hence, the sacrifice. And this sacrifice was imperative in the fullest sense, owing to the ability of the planetary logos to identify himself in full consciousness with the soul in all forms of life, latent within the planetary substance. And as Aries is the initiator of impulses, now whether it's the impulse to incarnate or the impulse to return to its original source, and that's the power of the Ray One, that withdrawal power, the cosmic man, the solar Arjuna, is wrestling for his individualized, perfected self-consciousness and for liberation and freedom from the form and from the not self. So it's not just our logos, but it's also the solar logos, the planetary logoi, and here, all of us, men here on earth, we all battle for similar ideals. To perfect self-consciousness and to be free from the form, from the not self, and to return home, back home, to where we originated, that is our monadic essence, our true self. So then let's have a look then at the purposes of the Logos. Why did the planetary Logos create this world and start the evolutionary and creative process? Only one answer has as yet been permitted to be given. And Sanat Kumara has created this planet and all that moves and lives therein in order to bring about a planetary synthesis and an integrated system whereby a tremendous solar revelation can be seen, to bring about a planetary synthesis. And we will see this a bit later. So, what does he mean by a planetary synthesis? The aim of the entire evolutionary scheme is to bring about these three centers, Shambhala, humanity, and hierarchy, into such close relationship that the synthesis of the divine purpose can work out harmoniously on every possible level of consciousness. So we have the first, Shambhala, the logoic head's chakra. It's the dynamic agent of the extra-planetary purpose, the expression of divine planetary will, the energy of synthesis and bringing things together, the source of all planetary life. Then hierarchy is logoic, our logoic heart center, who is the agent of the plan of evolution, the expression of his heart center of divine love or pure reason. And then there's the third center, his throat center, us, humanity, the agent of all three aspects, all three divine aspects, in relation to the three subhuman kingdoms. The expression, we are the expression of the divine intelligence making therefore us, humanity, the macrocosm of the microcosm, the three subhuman kingdoms. So that's what DK meant by planetary synthesis, so that the will of the Logos can manifest through us, through humanity on Earth, and that we create this planetary synthesis together with the divine love of hierarchy. But why was only one answer permitted? Because if this power, impersonal and potent, should fall into the hands of the Black Lodge, the results would be disastrous. Because most of the members of this Black Lodge of cosmic evil are upon the first ray itself. But they are completely detached and divorced from all contact with the energy of love. They've cut themselves off from the spiritual hierarchy. These evil but powerful beings know well the uses of the will, but only in its destructive aspect. Well, having said that, we haven't really penetrated any distance into the meaning of the divine purpose. We don't know any more than that. What DK said is that he's only indicated the method whereby it's being attained. But the true objective remains still an obscure mystery, guarded rigidly in the council chambers of Sanat Kumara. What the planetary purpose is, DK says, he doesn't know. But what he can say is that part of that purpose is to liberate light and love into a wider universe and to free the solar system from the attacks of cosmic evil. And no wonder it is that objective is very strictly and secretly guarded. And to liberate light and love into the wider universe is echoed in the great invocation, let love and light work out. And then in the second invocation that he gave us in 1940, construct a great defending wall around humanity through the radiance of the one soul, so that then we can implement, together with hierarchy, we can implement that planetary purpose. We can, planetary purpose of synthesis. We can make it manifest on Earth. We can create that. Another purpose that we are told, which is very important, is the salvation of the lesser lives. The Lord of the world, Sanat Kumara, through meditation is carrying forward processes which he instituted in his original creative meditation back in the darkest night of the time, when he decided to create this planet of ours for strictly redemptive purposes, to bring life and to liberate the spirit and the soul within. And that theme of redemption, which underlies all initiatory processes, is hidden in the karmic responsibilities of Sanat Kumara. He created our planetary life and all that is within and upon it in order to will this law, the Syrian law of freedom. If you remember from our past studies, the law of freedom from Sirius is that pulling away from matter. It's being divinely indifferent. That is the consciousness being divinely indifferent to the pull of matter. So he decided to wield this law with full consciousness, with full understanding, and yet at the same time, there's his purpose to bring release to the myriad forms of his creation, redemption, salvation of these lower lives, so that they can move on, they can progress. So the cosmic Christ was crucified upon the cross of matter. And by that great sacrifice, opportunity was offered to all evolving lives in all kingdoms of nature and in all created worlds. Thus, they could progress. And this applies not only, friends, to Sanat Kumara here on Earth, who created the planet Earth for that purpose, but the cosmic Christ also refers to the soul of our solar logos, because he did the same thing for the solar system, all these lives in our solar system, all these evolutions. And the cosmic logos did the same thing. And for what? So that he may learn the meaning of systemic dispassion, that is, that divine indifference, to be dissociated from all forms and material substance, and upon the cross of matter, eventually find liberation and the freedom of the spirit. So in other words, governed then by the ray 1 of Aries, identified with the will of the purpose of the solar logos and the cosmic logos, under the law of sacrifice, our planetary logos created our planet to not only learn to be dispassionate through non-identification with a form, that is the third aspect of divinity, but to shift its identification to the soul, to the purposes of his monad, and in the process to bring salvation to the lesser lives, that is releasing the soul and the life within from its prison of matter and help it to return back to its source. And the evolution of the sun, that is of the Christ consciousness, of the cosmic incarnation of the Christ, is of immense importance in the plans of the being greater than the solar logos, that is the cosmic logos, he about whom naught may be said. So the evolution of the second aspect of divinity, of consciousness, of the soul, is of immense importance, not just is important, but immense. So it just shows you the importance of the creation of our universe, our earth, our solar system, so as to unfold the consciousness aspect. It was to redeem substance and its forms that the planetary logos came into manifestation, and the entire hierarchy with its great leader, the Christ, the present world symbol, might be regarded as the hierarchy of redeemers, skilled in the science of redemption, so that the substance of the next solar system will be of a higher order than that of the present one, and therefore be consequently more responsive to the will aspect of the Logos. That is to make our solar system, our Earth, more loving, so that the next solar system will start off not with just intelligent matter, but intelligent, loving matter, so that then the will of the Logos will be revealed. And that urge to sacrifice, to lose in order eventually to gain, such is the underlying story of evolution. It's a governing principle of life itself. And such is the cosmic deity, the solar logos, Sanat Kumara, the great sacrifice, the solar lords, the Christ, all world saviors and all of humanities. This is their endeavor. So it's quite universal. So this is the loved cross. This is the symbol of the law of sacrifice. The rose being the color of affection, and the bird flying free, which is a symbol of the soul, flying free in time and space, not being affected by matter. So the cosmic Christ is liberated from the cross of matter, from identification with matter. But the difference between us and the planetary logos, the macrocosm, lies in the fact that the Lord of the world is not identified with a Maya which he has created, and which has its purpose in eventually bringing about the release of the prisoners of the planet. And to that Maya, he is supremely indifferent, because he's learning his lesson of dispassion. And that's very, very much what Christ said 2,000 years to his disciples. Be of this world, be in this world, but not of the world. So then what are the results in the disciple for achieving that same divine indifference as the Lord of the world? So as the disciple moves into the world of Maya, free from all illusion, unhindered by glamour and uncontrolled by these Mayavic forces, he is rapidly arriving at his own little world is concerned, at the same divine indifference which characterizes Sanat Kumara. Thus, increasingly, he becomes aware of the plan as it exists in the universal mind, and the purpose which motivates the will of God. So then he embodies later on as an initiate this purpose. So quick summary is the will of the planetary logos, aligned with that of the solar logos, is an expression of the law of sacrifice and concerns itself with a theme of redemption. And it's a matter of consciousness related to what it's identified with, whether it's the form or the soul or the spirit. Hence the secret of our logos. What's the nature now of the will? DK tells us that the secret of the will lies in the recognition of the divine nature of men. Only this can evoke the true expression of the will. It has, in fact, to be evoked by the soul. That's why we said earlier on that the soul reveals the will. So as the soul dominates the human mind and controls the personality, then the will is evoked. And the secret of the will is closely tied in with a recognition of the unconquerable nature of goodness and the inevitability of the ultimate triumph of good. Very important statement, friends. So the secret of the will lies in the recognition of the divine nature of man, that is, that we are God within. Our essence is that of God, which is goodness, love, and that evokes the will. What is then the Shambhala force? It's that unifying synthetic force. But in its true expression, the will today is needed as the propelling, expulsive force and also as a clarifying, purifying nature, agent. So let's first look at the unifying and synthetic force. So this is the force which pours today into the world from Shambhala, governed by Aries. It's that unifying synthetic force. The most obvious and powerful force in the world today is that of the first ray of will and power. Because we've had several Shambhala impacts since the late 1800s, right until the year 2000. So we've had a shot of that Shambhala force. And it works out in two ways. As the will of God in the world, in world affairs, which is ever the will to good. Steadily, if we study human history intelligently, we are told that we will see that there has been a regular and rhythmic progression towards unity and synthesis in all departments of human affairs. And this unity in multiplicity is the eternal plan. A unity in consciousness, a multiplicity in form. Unity of consciousness through our planetary logos, transformative soul ray, ray 2, and multiplicity in form through his transfiguring ray 3 personality. But unfortunately, that Shambhala force has been distorted and misapplied, and it is a destructive element in the world affairs today. And that refers to men's use of the Shambhala force of will, which is seldom as yet the will to good in active expression, but something which leads to self-assertion of the individual and of the nation, and to war with its accompaniments, separation, selfish diplomacy, hate and armaments, disease and death. Completely distorted. And we see that today still. Secondly, it's the destructive aspect of the Shambhala force. Now, this is a destruction which removes the form that imprison the inner spiritual life and that hide the inner soul light. It's the destroying aspect of life itself. Just as there is a destructive agency in matter itself. And it's not a destruction of forms by force like we are seeing today, which is imposed by all these aggressive and separative forces. But it's a destruction which is brought about by the strengthened life within the form. That is, it's the strengthened life energy of the jewel within the egoic lotus of the soul and within every chakra, which expresses itself through harmony and unity. It produces necessarily understanding and promotes goodwill. And eventually it ends the separative, isolating tendencies of mankind. And this is a statement by Decay. I would ask all aspirants and disciples to ponder upon the destructive purpose of God, a purpose which is motivated by love, guided by a balanced judgment as to form, and which cherishes and fosters the life and its resultant spiritual values. And we know that in healing, the healer works entirely with the life aspect, with the life within the jewel, that will to good within the jewel. And DK tells us that the perfect healer is non-existent these days. But we have to try. We have to make it our aim. And this is what we do in our healing. This is our objective. And the destructive energy of the soul comes via the third eye, which registers the will. And if you remember from our studies of the third eye, it has a destructive aspect, and the energy flowing through the third eye can have a disintegrating and destroying effect. It can, through its focused attention, directed by the intelligent will, drive out physical matter. It is the agent of the soul in the purificatory work. It is this third work of the soul which is touched upon here. That destructive work of getting rid of the old forms, of shaking out of the body's matter of undesirable nature, and of breaking down the barriers and limitations to true soul activity. Hence the reference to death in the second invocation, which was given during the Second World War in 1940. Let light and love and power and death fulfill the purpose of the coming one. And it's death to personality predilections, all these preconceived ideas and ideals, as well as all these beloved tendencies that we tend to hoard, to hang on to, these cultivated habits of thoughts that have passed their use-by dates and are not aligned with the soul's purpose. They must be brought under the power of death. They must be eliminated. And the third aspect of the Shambhala force in Aries, as we know, transmits ray 7, is the energy of organization. This is the energy which sets in motion the activity of the great ray lives and started the motivation and impulse of that which produced manifestation. Thus were the 7 ray qualities brought into expression. And the relation of spirit and matter, which is exactly what ray 7 does, it relates the will and form, spirit and matter. That relation produced this ordered process, which again, psychically and under law, creates the manifested world as a field for soul development and as an area wherein divine purpose is wrought out through the medium of the plan. And it will be for humanity then to precipitate and to stabilize the appearing good. And this they will learn to do through the utilization of that third shambhalic energy, the energy of organization. The new world will be built upon the ruins of the old. The new structure will rise. Men of goodwill everywhere, under the guidance of the new group of world servers, will organize themselves into battalions of life. And their first major task must be the development of right human relations through the education of the masses. Now let's distinguish between desire and will, because that can be a source of confusion. What's desire? Well, desire is not from the angle of what's real, reality from the higher plane. It's not a subjective quality, except that it's insofar it's a distortion or a glamorous use of the energy of will. Desire is the force of the form nature, that is from the 6th astral plane, whereas will is the energy of the soul from the mental plane, expressing itself as direction, progress, conformity to the plan. And that plan, from the standpoint of the individual, is as much of the sensed will of God as he can. At any particular stage in his experience, he can grasp and understand. So desire is an aspect of the will, though. That is, it is will on the astral plane and will on the mental plane. Desire works from and through the material form upwards. It's invocative. When masked and focused, can invoke the will. But the will from the mental plane works downwards into form, bending form consciously to divine purpose. It's evocative. And when evoked, it ends desire and becomes an immanent, propulsive, driving force, stabilizing, clarifying, and amongst other things, destroying. That's as much as we can understand. Dike tells us. And the evocation of the will and its effect upon the unprepared, materialistically minded person might and would prove a disaster. It would simply serve to focus and strengthen the lower self-will, which is the name we give to realized, determined desire. It could then create such a driving force directed to selfish ends that the person might become a monster of wickedness. And one such figure in ancient times was Nero, and the modern example is Hitler. And I'm sure that you can find many, many other examples of this distortion of spiritual will, and that has strengthened the personal or the personality will of some of the leaders today. Desire, unfortunately, is as yet the strongest force in the world. Organized, unified desire was the basic reason for the appalling success of the Axis powers. Eventually, however, there comes a life when the disciple is confronted by both the dweller and the angel simultaneously, and the major conflict of his experience takes place. So it is today in the world. Hasn't changed from when this book was written in the 30s. The spiritual and the material are in conflict, and humanity itself is the battleground. The forces of evil are those intelligent, evil, unloving, hateful individualities which are to the world of selfish and material focus what the hierarchy of masters working under the Christ are to struggling human aspirants. And the power of these evil forces is enormous. Don't we know it? For they recognize no restrictions or ordinary, decent human limitations. They work through violence, coercion, cruelty, hate, terror, and lies. They aim to subjugate the human consciousness through the complete control of men's minds, through the withholding of the good and the promulgation of evil. They stimulate the brains of men through the extent of their evil and magical knowledge. And that is literally and physically. So then how do we combat evil? DK tells us there is only one way in which this focused evil will, which is responsive to the Shambhala force, can be overcome. And that is by the opposition of an equally focused spiritual will displayed by responsive men and women of goodwill who can train themselves to be sensitive to this type of new incoming energy and learn how to invoke and evoke it. Only the will to good will suffice to blot out and annihilate the will to evil. And that's the 9th law of healing. The arousing of the men of goodwill in every nation, men who see humanity as a whole and all men as brothers is the only way in which this rising tide of hate can be stemmed. Let's define this will to good a little bit better here. The will to good is the basic quality of divine purpose, involving planned activity and a definite goal to be achieved. It necessitates the ability to think in terms of the whole, and we saw that earlier on. The ability to think in terms of the whole. An understanding of the lessons of the past and a vision based not on love or soul sight, but on a conviction as to the immediate purpose of Sanat Kumara as he works it out through the Christ and the planetary hierarchy, that is through love. Yet, even a little grasp or understanding of it, meaning understanding of the spiritual will, would aid humanity to drive evil, whether it's individual, group, or planetary, back to the place from where it came, and would aid in the release of humanity from the terror which is today stalking abroad, defying God and men. So DK tells us then you can consequently see why there was more than the casual use of the current word in my mind when the terms goodwill and the terms will to good were discussed. It wasn't just kindness and good intention, but the focused will to good, which can and must evoke the Shambhala energy and use it for the arresting of the forces of evil. So then what's the distinction between the will to good and goodwill? Very briefly, friends, because time is running away now. Goodwill is more focused in the masses, in the kindness and good intentions. It's the quality of mass of well-meaning people in the world, the emotional, the idealistic, motivated by goodwill, by kindness and good intention, but focused on the astral plane. Whereas will to good is a life and ruled by conditioned by the spiritual triad. It's a responsiveness to the monadic inflow. It's focused in the new group of world servers. It's the quality of the new group of world servers, the initiates, the world disciples, the trained thinkers, and the intelligent men and women and aspirants focused on the mental plane. If the desire, which is the second aspect of the will, is in the lower echelons of humanity, will to good, I meant goodwill is the second aspect. My apologies. I'm trying to rush here. Start again. Goodwill is the second aspect of the will in the lower echelons of humanity, but the will to good is the second aspect of the will in the higher echelons of humanity. And I think that's a very clear distinction between the two. But this Shambhala force, we are told, is nevertheless available for right usage. And its power to express it lies in its understanding. That's why we've had that collection, that compilation of the will, so that we can understand it a bit better. And its group use. So 2 words, its use by the group, because it's safer, and understanding. And DK wants to point out that the will aspect can be contacted only from the mental plane. And only those, therefore, who are working with and through the mind can begin to appropriate this energy. Hence, for the aspirant and the disciple on the reversed wheel, the key word for Aries is, I come forth, and from the plane of mind as I rule. And so those who seek to evoke the Shambhala force are approaching close to the fire, the energy of fire, because fire is the symbol and the quality of the mental plane. Fire is an aspect of the divine nature. Fiery goodwill and the conscious focused use of the Shambhala force can counter fire by fire. And this must be done. And what DK recommends then for the advanced disciple is initiated thinking. That is, it is essentially triadal thinking and is registered by the brain when the antecorana is somewhat constructed. And there is some form of direct communication between the lower mind and the brain of the personality and the higher mind. That is the spiritual triad, and that via the soul. So then what do we do in the meantime if we haven't achieved that level of being an initiate of the 3rd degree? Well, DK tells us that if we act as if we were initiate and discovers that as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. Because the heart is the custodian of the power of the imagination, and the imagination is released into creative activity when the disciple acts as if he were the soul in full expression, as if the master was ever aware of the doings of his disciple, as if he walked in full liberation. Great suggestion here, or instruction by DK. All initiates must and eventually do express dynamic, creative will, a focused purpose which expresses only the will to good, and also that sustained effort which brings fulfillment. Sustained effort. Not doing it one day and then doing it another day and then allowing distractions to come in the way or making excuses, but it's that sustained effort. We will certainly fall, but so long as we pick up, we stand up again, we get up and keep going and keep going. Sustained effort, which brings fulfillment. Desire, when massed and focused, can invoke will. Will, when evoked, ends desire and becomes that driving force, that stabilizing, clarifying, and finally destroying force. And it's this will aroused by invocation which must be focused in the light of the soul and dedicated to the purposes of light and for the purposes of establishing right human relations, which must be used in love to destroy all that is hindering the free flow of human life, and that is bringing death, spiritual and real, to humanity. This will must be invoked and evoked. And DK is asking, could there be organized a group which would take this subject as a theme of their meditation, which would try to fit themselves by right understanding to contact and use the Shambhala energy? Would it not be possible gradually to elaborate this theme of the revelation of the divine will so that that subject can be ready for presentation to the thinking public? Well, DK in Externalization on page 314, he suggests a meditation to foster the will to good and the will to love and to work. This effort on your part will express itself in a steadily deepening love of humanity, for all men and for each other. It will demonstrate in a constant effort to invoke the spiritual will in self-discipline and persistence. So I would ask all of you who associate yourselves with me, meaning DK, in the work of the future, each day to use the very brief meditation which I outline below. And this is the meditation that we do every day, friends, the TOS meditation. It is held every day at 9 p.m. GMT, and then we have an additional session for those who can't attend because of the time differences. And it's held every Sunday at 11 a.m. GMT using the same link. But you can join us any day when time and circumstances permit. But you can still do the meditation on your own if you can't participate at the scheduled times. And recordings of this guided meditation is available on our website. By all means, visit our website or send us an email to for any other details that you might like. And in our synthesis, triangular synthesis meditation, we note that wording in the second invocation. Look at these words of power that come through in that second invocation, which was given in 1940 and was suited to the conditions of war. And it was an invocation which was intended to evoke the Shambhala force, the Lords of Liberation, the rider from the secret place. Many, this life-giving spirit, that extraplanetary being, the spirit of resurrection in Shambhala. The rider is also the Christ. Come and save. the fiat of the Lord, the will of the Lord be expressed on earth. And the rule of evil now must end through the evocation of the will to good from Shambhala. So conclusion, friends, the center where the will of God is known, this is Shambhala, where the will to good originates. And this will to good is essential love. And we will have a very brief discussion for those who want to stick around. Tia will be saying a few words. She's our resident astrologer and way more knowledgeable than a lot of us. She'll be talking about the effect of all these planets in Aries coming up in the month of April. But very briefly, though, we see that there is an inflow of that Shambhala force through Aries, through all these planets. What can we expect from that? If Aries initiates the cycle of manifestation, so how will the will to good manifest itself? The start, will it be the start of a planetary synthesis, of a unity of consciousness? Will there be an inflow of divine ideas? And will humanity see itself in a new light towards greater unity, greater cooperation? And or will it revert back to its old ways of relating to each other as separative and competitive entities or nations? And Mars, being the personality ruler of Aries, will bring conflict and death to the form, while Mercury, the soul ruler, may bring illumination and the development of the intuition. As a result of that conflict and death, then through conflict, the will to good can be wrought out. And Neptune in Aries will dissolve outdated beliefs, personal or global, of how the world should run, and will allow the new spiritual identities to emerge. And Saturn in Aries will bring that spiritual discipline, manifest the new principles, making them tangible, practical. It will encourage strategic action to materialize a new life path and for the new civilization to emerge. And Chiron in Aries, Chiron, who is our teacher, will teach wholeness, a new approach to life, reorienting the consciousness to soul values using the will. But will humanity learn that lesson from that inflow of divine energies flooding the earth? Only time will tell. So now I'll give the floor to Tia, who will elaborate a lot more on what I could possibly say. Tia, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. This will be quick. Really, this talk is about how we can best, what to expect in April with dealing with this stellium of planets that will be moving through Aries. It is highly unusual. I think a lot of astrologers have tried to see when we've had this many planets passing through Aries, and they have not been able to come up with a date certain when we've seen these many planets. So one other thing, well, the main thing I want you to take away from this, there are two things to take away. Two thoughts if you don't remember anything else from what I'm saying. We know that the exoteric ruler of Mercury is Mars. And we know that the esoteric ruler of Mercury, an esoteric ruler of Aries is Mars. And we know that Mercury is the esoteric ruler. And so Master DK has told us that the inherent energies of the 12 constellations, of which Aries is one, blends the ray energies in a way that produces the essential dualism of manifested life, and incidentally are responsible for the peculiar difficulties that confront humanity on the arc of evolutionary experience upon our planet. We can find that on Esoteric Astrology, page 422. So when we look at any sign, we have to examine the positive aspects and the negative aspects, or in our practical everyday application, how we use these energies skillfully or how they display when they have unskilled use. So if we can go back to the stellium, Nicole, the picture of the stellium. So we know in this particular period, particularly on April 17th, we will have all of these planets that will be in the sign of Aries. And when I just talked about the exoteric ruler being Mars and the esoteric ruler being Mercury, you really can get a clue as to how you navigate this period, right? Because the soul, we want to infuse its wisdom into the personality. So stop, you know, and think before you act. That's what you need to think about. Stop and think before you speak. You need to pause and really use that Mercurian intelligent aspect, monastic development to navigate this period. Well, that's one key. The second is Master DK has taught us that we always work with its opposite. And we know in everyday life, if we have, we're struggling with Aries energy, we know that what we do is we add its opposite, which is Libra, which will allow us to bring about that balance, and we know that, as we know from Master DK, Libra guards the secret of balance and equilibrium. So we need that to sort of temper the fiery energies that are coming from Aries during this time. Now, we know the positive aspects of Aries are confidence, courage, and a pioneering spirit, or a skilled Aries displays this. But we also know that the unskilled aspects or the unskilled displays of Aries energy are often impulsiveness, impatience, and unreliability. Now, Aries is ruled by Mars exoterically, and this symbolizes energy, assertiveness, and action. So now when you look at that chart, um, I when you look at all of these Aries planets, I'm sorry, I don't have the cursor to show you, but what I would say, we call this in astrology the dispositor planet. When you have a stellium like this, all of the planets are under the management of Mars. So Martian energy, that low grade Martian energy, well, not low grade, but the lower expression or the exoteric expression of Aries is pervasive during this period. Okay. And it's really interesting because it's conjunct Mercury, which is within 3 degrees right here. So you have the exoteric ruler and the esoteric ruler in conjunction right next to each other. So, again, I would emphasize the need to really focus on thinking before you speak, pausing, because we know that Aries, they rush forward blindly and they really have this impelling energy that's so strong that often, they burn out very quickly because they want to get it done right away. And if you look at the chart, we have Saturn in Aries, and that Saturn is in its fall. in Aries. And I'll explain to you what that means in a minute. I just told you what it's in rulership. It's exalted in the sun, which is it'll be in. So that gives us vitality and leadership. So that will be very good as far as your physical body is concerned. And also things that you want to initiate. The sun is very powerful, but it's right there next to Chiron in Aries. When we have Chiron in Aries, we usually are dealing with a wound to self-confidence. And because Chiron is right next to the sun, we call that being under the beams. It's greatly weakened, meaning that we're not going to see necessarily the positive expression of Chiron as a teacher, but we have to watch our self-confidence when we come through this time. You'll get new ideas. You want to press out on things, but because Saturn is in Aries and Saturn is in its fall in Aries, it's not comfortable in Aries. Aries is it's not comfortable because Saturn is all about time. It's all about commitment. It's all about responsibility. Aries is about rushing forth, getting it done, creating very quickly. And so when you have Saturn in Aries, which we're going to have for about 2.5 years, if you can learn discipline, and how to deal with that impelling force, you can achieve, but know that there may be struggle with that. And the part about Aries is because it wants to accomplish things rather quickly, it can sometimes give up its mission and purpose because things don't happen right away. So you can get discouraged. Let's put it like that. And then add the fact that wound to self-confidence. These are all things that you have to be mindful of that may be operating in the collective, but also in your personality as well. Um, Mercury in Aries, we have to, that is speech. And one of the things that you have to be very careful with is not being sharp with your words, or when you're dealing with this Martian energy, this lower expression of Aries, because we know that Mars is ruled by the sixth ray, and we that know that Mercury is ruled by the fourth ray. Both of these rays have very much in them, very much around them energetically dealing with conflict. The sixth ray actually will engage in conflict, but the result of that conflict is usually one side subordinate to the other. Mercury, on the other hand, the fourth ray, is harmony through conflict, meaning that there are two sides that may engage in conflict, but it usually results in a harmonious result, perhaps where there's some level of equilibrium. So in that case, I would say that that was a skillful use of the Libran energy to bring about a different result. And so you want to make sure that even there will be conflicts, and we know that people associate Aries with war, and there's conflicts and intensification of warlike energies. But the question is, because all of these planets are under Mars. They're under the rulership. They're under the, let's say, the governing or the management of Mars in this particular stellium. And so war, conflict is always going to be a background theme in this month of April. And so you really need to lean into your diplomacy. You need to lean into your Libra, your harmony, in order to navigate this period. And be careful what you say, because things can really, when other people are being combative, because it can escalate rather quickly. With a moon in Aries, you actually will see this again. There's a possibility of inappropriate reactions. Um, the moon does not express itself very easily in Aries. Often you have inappropriate reactions and irritation. So what we find ourselves doing, because we know how to work with these energies, is a lot of balancing. That will be our task for humanity and the collective at this point, because we know. And how do we do that effectively? Well, in any situation, we really need to employ the powers of Mercury, our mind, and really think before we act, speak, in thought, word, and deed when we are dealing with other people. and not to rush forth blindly, as an Aries normally does, but to slow it down, which we can powerfully utilize that Saturn in Aries and become strategic about it. That's how Aries are really the Mercury, or the esoteric ruler of Aries, in a very skillful expression, is strategic, and they're able to conceptualize their work in a way that it sustains their interest, helps them to complete their mission. Air signs, fire signs are very good, and air signs are very good. These cardinal signs are very good about initiating and creating, but it's the fixed signs that have the commitment to complete the goal. And so you have to, under this energy, learn how to. You will get creative inflows. You may find a spirit of initiation, but you need whatever comes in not to get discouraged if it doesn't manifest quickly. There may be a struggle over this next 2 year period of what new construct or paradigm that you're bringing in under Aries, to keep working at it, working at it, working at it until it manifests. It will be a challenge. Neptune in Aries gives you an opportunity to have new dreams, right? But you don't want to be over idealistic about what you're trying to bring in. You know, um, People get very enthusiastic over their belief systems in Aries, um, and it can often bring about fanatical behavior. So, in 1533 to 1548, it brought about the fanatical religious struggles and the dissolution of the English monasteries. In 1697 to 1712, Neptune and Aries seeded the Enlightenment. Um, in 1861 to 75, there was extremism over slavery and new colonial and industrial utopias. And the Theosophical Society was founded with Neptune and Aries. So, what we want to do is, uh, thinking about that sixth ray, and the fourth ray again, because we in Neptune we see the sixth ray. We want to think deeply about things. Whatever your dream or whatever it is that you are manifesting, think deeply about it, not fanatically. And you have to be careful about that and make sure you know the nuance difference. And that is the key to working with that Neptunian energy in Aries. Again, Neptune, Mercury, and Mars are in a very, very tight conjunction. So, again, be careful, even for your dreams or how you feel about things. For example, for political issues, right? This is how this could be an unskilled expression. People may have very clear thoughts or ideas about political ideas, but they can do it in a very aggressive um, a way. Um, and we see that now on our social media, attacking and discounting the the beliefs or the opinions of all other people. Again, that's that sixth ray, not one being subordinate to the other, as opposed to having mutuality and harmony and understanding. So that's just really a general overview. I could go much more deeper, but I think you get the gist of it. Again, the two themes: stop and think before you act. And the second theme: use liberally during this period. Infuse it to help balance this energy, because we're already having to deal with the energies of the fire horse. We have the problem of the herd that I mentioned before. And now we also have this tendency towards fanaticism and war and aggressive behaviors, all unskilled expressions of Aries. But we know that we need to use that Mercury and to bring in that fourth ray as much as we can, which is humanity. So I think that's how we can be most effective in our lives and also in our service work.
Thank you, Tia. Anybody would like to ask questions? Although, sorry, there's not much time now for that, so we won't be too lengthy. But any comments that anybody would like to make briefly? It's a lot to take in. Thank you, Tia, for this very explicit conjunction of the stelliums. Simple words. That's a great gift that you have. Okay, then, friends, we'll leave it at that then. And we do have our TOS meditation in about half an hour. So if you would like to join, you're very welcome. I know for those in Europe, that's very, very late for you, and I apologize for that. But we thank you for being here anyway. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Tia. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.